Okay, moving along with the next presentation. Before that, I would like to remind everybody listening in to send their questions through our chat function. And we will try to take them after the presentation. So next company to present is Orexo, and here to present, as usual, is the CEO, Nikolaj Sörensen. Go ahead, Nikolaj.
Thank you, Peter. So I'm here to present Orexo and to talk quite a lot about the epidemic beyond the pandemic. So what we have seen during the COVID-19 pandemic is unfortunately a scaringly fast rise in number of people with mental illness, and in particular people with substance use disorder, from alcohol misuse to opioid misuse. And the numbers that we've seen from the last 12 months, the number of people dying from overdose in the US have broken any record and expectations for this. It has been an incredibly negative development that we've seen in opioid overdose in the US, which is a result, we believe, of the mental illness that you have with the COVID-19 pandemic. We know that a lot of the physicians have closed down their offices. They don't open up for new patients during the pandemic. We've seen patients who are losing their job or in other ways are exposed to mental stress are falling back into their substance use disorder. And unfortunately, the supply of drugs has not been impacted negatively during the pandemic. So all in all, we are in a space after the headlines from the pandemic, the COVID-19 pandemic is disappearing. I'm afraid that we will see a lot more headlines around mental illness and in particular substance use disorder. And this will be kind of a theme for the Orexo presentation today. So where are we from Orexo? We are, as you know, we're a company with several commercial pharmaceutical products that we've developed out of our R&D offices in Uppsala. We have our own commercial presence in the US with our own field force. We have a quite strong financial background. We have quite a lot of money on the bank account. We were profitable for quite a while until we decided to invest into a new business area, digital therapies, and to advancing one of our pipeline project, Orexo 124. If we summarize the three main areas of Orexo, we have our US pharma operations, which today is only Zubsolv. In the US pharma operations, we have an EBIT margin of around 50%. The last 12 months numbers is somewhat lower than the numbers we had last year. That is explained by changes in reimbursement back in 2019 for Zubsolv. We have launched 3 new digital therapies. It's an area that I believe very strongly in, but also have to be realistic and see this as a new disruption into the healthcare system in the US. There are no precedents in terms of how do you establish reimbursement and others. So all of this is something we're working on right now. How do you get reimbursement? How do you get healthcare providers comfortable of using these new tools? And how do you launch these into the healthcare system, in particular during a COVID-19 pandemic, where it's difficult for our sales reps to meet their customers? And then we have our lead pipeline project, Orexo 124. It's an overdose rescue medication that is particular developed to address the opioids from overdoses from synthetic opioids, which is fentanyl. When I started working with Orexo and in the US market back in 2013, very few people died from fentanyl overdose. The majority was dying from either painkillers or heroin. Today, it's the exact opposite. Most people die from fentanyl, and there we know that the existing overdose rescue medications are simply not strong enough for a lot of these patients. So a little about our main product, Zubsolv, and our US pharma business. This has been a market where we have been used to see strong double-digit growth. However, during the pandemic, we have seen a somewhat a drop. Part of that explained by an acceleration in the early phases of the pandemic, where a lot of people took out more products than they needed in a normal month. So you had this kind of hoarding that happened in the beginning. But what we also have seen is that during the pandemic, we have seen less access to physicians. So physicians, as I said, are not opening up for new patients. We've seen patients who are dropping out of treatment. And unfortunately, we can't walk away from the number of people dying, close to 70,000 dying from opioid dependence. All of these 70,000 patients are most likely some of the patients who are going in and out of treatment. And here, of course, that number of people dying is something that also has an impact on the overall market development. However, looking ahead, we see there are a lot of drivers that would explain that this market should go back up to a very strong growth rate. And in particular, we're seeing a lot of opioid trials and settlements in the US where companies are paying a lot of money in damages for how they have promoted opioid painkillers. And that money should be reinvested according to the settlements into improved treatment. And that will, of course, benefit access to treatment and would give new opportunities for Orexo also. If we look at our Zubsolv market, the biggest part of our market, what we call open, that's where we have been reimbursed. There have not been any changes in the reimbursement during the last year. It's a slight increase if we look at the development of the first 2 quarters, and if you look across, it's a very, very stable market throughout the time from in this graph, which I believe is going back all the way to 2019. If we look at the other part of the market, we have the green line, and that's where we have these exclusive contracts where Humana and United Health Group decided to open up for generic reimbursement back in 2019. And as we had 90% market share in United Health Group, that of course have had some impact on our development of Zubsolv. And finally, we have the non-reimbursed market. That's where Zubsolv is not reimbursed, which is a very small part of our market, which has declined a little. But the most positive is that we're actually keeping and defending quite well our top line, and it's the most important segment, that's the open segment. And if I look over the summer, our market share last week was actually exactly the same as we had in the first week of May, and it's about 2.9% and have been stable throughout the summer. If we just look in our core segment, our market share is about double of that, which is the commercial and open market. Our US pharma market operations, as I said before, is very profitable, and this is an area where we're seeing Zubsolv is evolving into becoming an area of, you could say, a little like a cash cow. We see it quite stable. We think there are some good opportunities for Zubsolv to continue to grow, but I must admit, I don't think that Zubsolv would suddenly double its sales. But we see a good market growth. We see good opportunities to continue to do price increases and to continue to working on our gross profit and EBIT margin. And here, the last quarter, the last 12 months, we have a 55% EBIT margin. Last quarter, it dropped a little, partly because of some legal expenses in the US. So are there any reasons to believe that this will continue to be a strong market? I think there is a lot of growth drivers, both in terms of the activities that we're seeing on federal and state levels to improve access and treatment when the COVID focus is hopefully soon over. I'm quite certain that the opioid epidemic again will be the #1 health issue that people will address in the US. We've seen that Zubsolv have been added to one of the largest Medicaid programs, the 4th largest in the US, Kentucky Medicaid, from July. And we're seeing the commercial segment is actually now starting to grow. It has been declining or very flat throughout the pandemic, but we've seen here during the summer that one is growing. That has 2 positive factors on us. This is where we have very good reimbursement. Nearly 100% of the commercial insured patients have access to Zubsolv, but it's also an area where we earn more money. And then we are looking forward to combine our Zubsolv offering to our patients with Modia, which is our digital therapy. One of the things that I think is something we should have more and more eyes on is on these opioid litigations and the settlements. And here the headlines are coming right now, basically daily. You see new movement. And just the other day, we had this $26 billion settlement where an increasing number of states have signed up for this. And that if you look at a space where the total cost of treatment is somewhere around $5 to $10 billion, depending on how much you put into that, then just one settlement of $26 billion where those monies should be dedicated in improving the life of people who are suffering from opioid dependence. That's an enormous boost in the money that goes into treatment. And this, I think, is a fantastic opportunity for Orexo and Zubsolv and Modia. So going into our digital therapies, Vorvida for alcohol misuse, Praxis for depression, and Modia for opioid use disorder. I continue to insist that I believe digital therapies is a part of the future of life science. Just looking at some of the valuations that we've seen for other companies who are entering this space, there are clearly a lot of other people who share that belief with me. I'm certain that in 5 to 10 years, every intervention with healthcare will have some kind of digital element, whether it's during the diagnostics phase, during the meeting with the doctor, or afterwards in the treatment. That depends on the disease area. But I'm certain that the increasing demand from an aging and more educated population will put a need for finding more effective ways to provide healthcare. And in particular in mental health, I believe that there are a lot of opportunities for digital therapies to complement the existing healthcare offering. I don't see this as a replacement, but a very strong complement to enable the healthcare system to treat more patients with the same resources. I'm also quite aware that this is in its infancy, and we have paid the price a little during the last year. We have seen a lot of interest, but we have been struggling a little with some of the quite firm infrastructure there is around reimbursement and about introduction of new technologies in the healthcare system in the US. And while we have several some fast movers who are not either testing, or even one, Trinity Health North Dakota, is right now in the end of August starting to implementing our digital therapies right out to the end customers, we do think there's a lot of work to be done to create processes and systems that can manage these digital therapies. These are not only new to Orexo, they are also new to the healthcare system. But long term, I'm certain this is something where we are now well positioned to be one of the winners in this game. So our digital therapies, Deprexis, is a 12 weeks treatment, so 3 months. We have a list price right now of $399. Vorvida is an alcohol misuse, which product for alcohol misuse treatment. It's a 24 weeks treatment, and we have $599. And then we have Modia, which will not be sold directly to patients, but only be available through the healthcare system. And if you look at the number of patients for each of these disease areas, it's an enormous need. And if you look at the number of people who can't access their counselors in either depression or alcohol misuse, there's this incredible high need for something that enables patients to take control of their disease without having to seek a psychological counsel. What are we looking at with our digital therapies? I believe that the differentiator in the future will be how you can create clinical evidence that your products actually work. And that is a big difference. If you look at quite a lot of applications, if you go into App Store, for example, or similar opportunities for download, you will see more than 300,000 different options, which we call wellness app. But the majority, absolutely vast majority, more than 98%, have no clinical evidence whatsoever. This, I believe, is one of the differentiators. The other part is how these can work independently and actually replicate the way that the healthcare system works, which means that you don't have one approach to every patient, but you have systems that adapts to the patient need. And this is where we are aiming at with our partnership with Gaia, a German company, where we believe we have products that are very well proven through scientific evidence and clinical trials, but we also have systems that actually replicate very much the way that you would work with your therapist if you are suffering for depression, alcohol misuse, or opioid use disorder. Modia is the only one where we have no scientific evidence. That's the one for opioid use disorder. We have just during the summer started a trial with 400 participants. The recruitment is going quite well. We hope to have it finally recruited end of this year, early next year. We expect to have about 35 sites. Most of them are up and running, despite it's been vacation period. We started end of June. So we hope that in the end of 2022, we will have the outcome of this. The total investment is about $9 million, which about a third coming this year and 2/3 next year. We have made pretty good progress in our commercial contracts. I would have loved to see this going a little faster. And I would say that there are a lot of discussions ongoing, but I also realize that some of the inertia in the healthcare system with these new disruptive systems is quite high. It's something where you need to change the way that you're working. So while we have a lot and increasingly advanced discussions, it has not gone with the pace that I would have hoped, just looking at the supply or the need for these kind of new innovative solutions during the COVID-19. But I really believe that the agreement we have, for example, Trinity Health North Dakota, which is an integrated health distribution network, so a group of healthcare clinics, will play the role as a benchmark for other deals. We have some very advanced discussions with much larger healthcare networks than Trinity Health in North Dakota. Some of these, unfortunately, are in the area where COVID-19 right now is rebounding to new highs, for example, in Florida. And one of them, we had scheduled some last stage discussions with them when they went into what they call a code black, and that is due to the COVID situation. And I have to unfortunately accept that COVID-19 right now again became top of mind for most of the healthcare systems in the US. Then yesterday we started promoting our product through a partnership with something called Supergrid. It's the world's largest global digital network for people who are working with recovery from addiction. Supergrid has a lot of what they call mentors and counselors that they offer to patients. These mentors and counselors will start yesterday now make Deprexis and Vorvida available for their patients. So very exciting partnership, and we kicked it off yesterday together with Supergrid. Finally, OX124, our overdose rescue medication, where we are now approaching hopefully a launch in 2022. The target of OX124 is a new and stronger overdose rescue medication with naloxone. As I said before, the number of people dying from overdose from synthetic opioids like fentanyl is unfortunately today now the vast majority of people who are overdosing. And the issue with fentanyl is that the overdose rescue medications that were developed 5-10 years ago, they were developed for people overdosing with heroin or pain medication. But fentanyl is much, much stronger and requires something that is much faster and stronger in terms of overdose rescue medication. And that's where OX124 comes in. And when we did our first clinical trial, we saw that our product was had a much faster uptake and a higher uptake than the leading product in the US today. We believe the market opportunity is around $100 million. The market leader is turning about $300 million today. So where are we? We have established our commercial supply chain, and we have started our pivotal bridging study. We expect the results in Q4. We have started our stability study, which is really the time-limiting factor right now. Is FDA requires 12 months of stability for the product, so that has been put on the shelf, and now we just have to wait. And then when we have the 12-month stability data, we will then file with the FDA, which would be second half of 2022. And if that goes, then we will have nine months of review time with FDA. That would take us into the middle of 2023, and then a launch in the second half of 2023. Financial. So where are we? We have in the last 12 months at group revenue of 585 million. US Pharma, last 12 months, 539. It's a slightly lower number than what you saw in the beginning from 2020. And here the explanation is two things. One is actually the exchange rate. The 2020 dollar exchange rate was significantly higher. We were close to 9.7, and now it's at 8.7. So 1 krona less. It's nearly 10% drop. But also the United Health Group and Humana decline, of course, have had a negative impact on the demand. Our group EBITDA is negative, but I must say this is not something that I'm concerned with whatsoever, because if I look at my recurring revenues and my recurring expenses, the company is well in balance, and we could quite easily move the company to a situation where we would not burn any of the cash we have. But now we have made a deliberate decision to invest in setting up the digital therapy business and advancing OX124 into the final stage, which is also the most expensive stage of a drug development process. But should we take that away or decline that, we could quite easily move back to a company with a balanced profit line. Our cash position today is 680 million. We have $500 million in a corporate bond, so the net cash position is 180 million, which is also quite strong. We raised the corporate bond to be able to act in business development, in particular within the digital therapy business. But there we want to see proof of concept before we start to invest those money. And also, of course, in pharma, we are continuously looking for new pharma products and opportunities. Finally, I just have to be fully transparent. We have two legal processes, which unfortunately, one of them, the subpoena, is our US Pharma Business where they were issued a subpoena more than a year ago to receive all information with regards to Zubsolv marketing. That has cost us quite a lot of money, because we have actually had lawyers to go through every single document that have been sent to the US authorities to ensure that we haven't seen any compliance issues. And I must say, say right now, we can't see, and our lawyers can't see what is the background for the subpoena, and we have not heard anything from the US authorities since July 14th last year, except from practical issues of obtaining documents. Our patent infringement litigation against Sun Pharma is another one that happened during the summer last year. So we have started a process in the District Court of New Jersey, and we're running that. That is following a quite fixed schedule. Fortunately, we had 4 new patent applications that were just about to get granted, and we now have 4 new patents coming into our Orange Book, which will significantly strengthen our position in the discussion with Sun Pharma. So why should we believe in Orexo, a company that have had a little troublesome last year with new legal processes, digital therapies taking a little longer to take off, a Zubsolv that has been declining in revenues. But if you look behind that, we are in a space where there's a significant market need. We have a luxury compared to most other Swedish companies that we have a very profitable base in our Zubsolv business in the US. We have a strong cash position. We have commercial resources in the US. We know what it takes to launch products in the US. We have a pipeline not only of digital therapies, but we actually have several different pharma products waiting to come into the pipeline after OX124. And I strongly believe this digital therapeutics business, while it's still in its infancy, is the right place to be long-term in life science. And I'm actually certain that if we look in 10 years from now, digital therapies and digital solutions in life science is going to be the next big growth factor. And with that, I would open up for questions. Thank you for your attention.
Great. Thank you, Nikolaj. There is room for 1 or 2 questions, I think. If we start off with within digital therapy, very interesting future prospect for you. If you make there seem to be during the pandemic, there has been a lot of companies, more or less mature, coming to the market, launching what they call digital therapies. But probably your closest peer or competitor is obviously Pear Therapeutics, and they were acquired just recently by a SPAC company, valuing the company of around $1.5 billion. Your total market cap is around 1.2 million Swedish crowns. Is Pear Therapeutics that much ahead of you within the digital therapeutics that valid that big difference in valuation?
So my spontaneous answer would, of course, be no. And I would say Pear Therapeutics, I haven't gone through the details. I've just read secondary information, but I saw an article in Forbes magazine quite recently that have calculated that their recurring revenue was around $4 million. And there you have to remember some of the recurring revenues is actually solutions that they have sold to pharma companies who are giving it away as patient support programs. So they're not selling that much of Reset and Reset O, which they in their investor presentations lift up as their lead products. Both Reset and Reset O are, if you look at the clinical data behind, is not remotely close to the clinical strengths that we have seen for Vorvida or for Deprexis. Modia, we of course don't know yet because we have to do the study first. But we, of course, believe that when we designed Modia, we were looking very much at other products, including Reset and Reset O. So how can we ensure we have something that is differentiated? What are some of the issues that people see with the solutions that are already there? And I truly believe that Gaia, our German partner, is the most advanced company, one of the absolute most advanced companies in the world to develop these solutions. So I think compared to Pear, we have a product portfolio that has much better clinical evidence that it works. We are in more or less the same disease spaces. There is one difference, however, that is that Pear Therapeutics have a technology platform. We don't. So, of course, if you value the technology platform is something that is quite different as we are in licensing. But if I look at the digital therapy space, I actually believe that the technology is going to be more of a commodity. I think the big differentiator is how you generate your clinical data, how you're promoting it, how do you ensure that this gets traction within the healthcare system. And there there I would say that we have an advantage compared to Pear and others is that we are already there with a pharmaceutical product. So do we have a more than 10 times higher valuation for Pear Therapeutics? I think that is dramatic. Whether it's them who are too high or we who are a little low valuation at the moment, I would leave it to the investors to judge.
Yeah, great. Again, within digital therapeutics, you alluded and described some of the barriers that has to be broken down in order for this therapeutic mode to take off significantly. Do you feel that all these companies that now coming to the market with digital therapeutics, are you fiercely competing with each other, or are you jointly trying to actually change the way healthcare is working in order to establish new break down these barriers for digital therapeutics?
So there is something called the Digital Therapeutics Alliance in the US, where Orexo is a member, and so is Pear Therapeutics. And there we are working to set new standards for how do you treat this. But we do get from some of the payers, for example, we had one big payer where we had advanced discussions, who came back to us and said, you know, every day I have 10 companies who are coming with what they call digital therapies. Before we can decide on Orexo or anyone else, we need to ensure we have a process for how should we assess these digital therapies and how should we treat them when we have accepted one of them. So I think the volume of digital therapies is actually slowing down the process a little, because there's not that willingness to do an individual solution for Orexo, because the payers, the healthcare providers want to have a blanket approach that they can apply to several different suppliers of digital therapies. And that's where we are right now. There is no one solution. And unfortunately, the different digital therapeutic companies are competing not only with the products, but what solution do we think is the right one for the products. So this is something that there's so much interest in solving this. So there's no one who say we shouldn't do digital therapies, not among the payers, not among the healthcare providers. But of course, it takes time. And you have to remember, some of the healthcare providers in the US, they have 30-40 million patients. It's 4 times the size of Sweden. So it's not an easy process to change this around.
With those last words, I think we have to stop there. Very interesting to follow the development of the digital therapeutic space. Thank you, Nikolaj.
Thank you for inviting us. Thank you.